record to the. All righty, we are now recording. Beautiful. So we'll make sure to capture all of this. So again, please interrupt me. I don't mind interruptions. That's a good way to communicate. Okay. So step one, as far as taking the Acs Ccp, I am an authorized educator for the American Cheese Society, as well as I've been in the industry for cheese since 2005, roughly, where I've been a cheesemonger, an assistant store manager, field merchandiser, director of operations, VP of operations, and now all that was for Murray's Cheese up in New York City. And now I am the manager of education for the Institut du Fromage at GFI. All right. So this may seem a little basic coming across today, but I'm going to give you a lot of information. And I just kind of want to show you all the little tips and secrets of all the information that exists on the ACS website, and how the ACS website is your #1 study resource. I want to repeat that. It's your #1 study resource, this website. It's got a lot of information. Besides that, it's my job as an authorized educator not to give you the questions and the answers to the test, or necessarily to teach you everything about cheese before July. That's something that's not possible. It's my goal as an authorized educator to lead you to the most pertinent areas of study possible. It's my goal and my desire to kind of help weed out all of this information, because there's so much information. I'm going to weed all that out and narrow down your field of study, basically. Besides that, the ACS Ccp, it is a multiple choice test. There is no sensory evaluation in this. This test has nothing to do with really how cheeses taste, or maybe how to describe them in the sales piece. But really what this is about is memorization and knowing how to take a multiple choice test really well. So that's the major component. So with all of my students that I teach for the CCP, I highly recommend listening to these videos, taking notes, and then simply making flashcards. I know that's kind of like a high school or elementary school feeling to kind of how to do it, but it really helps, because most of this is really learning the glossary, definitions, and things like that, and also learning all the acronyms that are out there. Some of you that have been in the industry for a little bit longer may have a leg up on some of that. There always are these, because there's 11 domains, there's always going to be areas where you're going to feel the strongest versus where you're going to feel not the strongest. So of course, I always tell people, brush up on where you feel the strongest, and then really study and narrow down in those areas where you feel you need the most help. Okay, so just starting out, just the cheesesociety.org. Remember that. I have it saved on my desktop. I would save it to your desktop. This is your #1 resource to get all your information. And I'm just going to kind of go through this today and show you where to look and what this test is actually all about. So here, you have your resources tab, and this I've not logged into, so you don't have to be a current member to pull up all this information. So resources, certifications, conference, competition membership, education and opportunities. We're going to really focus here, and I'm going to go to certifications first. And then we're going to take a look at, of course, application process. I did send out an email as to it's time to apply now. I would rather go ahead and sign up earlier rather than later. I myself am taking the taste exam this year, and I've already applied. As soon as you can get on there, go ahead and apply. It is a fee of $35. That's non-refundable, but go ahead and do that. And to do that, you'll see online application. And we're not going to watch the video today, but of course, please take the time. It's a 17-minute video. It goes through how to apply. And I know, yeah, we're all adults, but it took me like 20 minutes to apply. They go through a third-party system now to go through the application process, and it does take a few minutes. I'm going to go ahead and tell you, just go ahead and give yourself 15 to 20 minutes to apply after you watch this 17-minute video. But just go to here. The video will help you go through. And of course, as soon as you just logged down, you can go through the application process just by clicking apply now, and it'll take you out. And again, you'll see that we've gone through a third-party source. I'm not going to load into this right now, but that's where you go to apply. So please take the time and do that. Perfect. Now I do want to go through though and talk about the Acs CCP Exam Preparation Guide, the Exam Blueprint. So the Certified Cheese Professional Exam is based on the skills and knowledge used by cheese professionals across the spectrum of the industry on a regular basis. The exam has 150 multiple choice questions. The candidates will have 3 hours to complete it. Exams are delivered via paper using a Scantron technology. This really goes back to if you've ever taken the ACT, the SAT, if you remember those days of the Scantron. And to give you a little bit more about the exam itself. So you do have 3 hours. On the day of the exam, you will not be allowed to take anything into the room with you other than, of course, what you're wearing. If you have a handbag or a backpack, you're going to have to check that at like a coat check area. You're not going to be allowed to take your own pens and writing utensils. A pencil will be provided for you. Once you get down and get into the exam after you've checked your bags, I would even suggest that day you don't need a purse. You don't need a backpack. Take whatever you have in your pockets. They'll even take up your phone. So you won't have access to your phone at that time. They take this very serious. The hallway into the room will be monitored with proctors. Once you get inside the room, there will also be several proctors walking around, making sure, not only checking for cheaters, but making sure if you need any help. Within that 3 hours, you will be allowed to go to the restroom if you need to. Just like in school, you would just raise your hand. A proctor would come around, make sure your paperwork is covered, and walk you to the restroom. We've got another minute. All righty. So once you get into the test, right, they will provide, there is math on the test. So when you get to your seat, what they're going to do is they're going to give you a small, basically like a whiteboard and an eraser pen so you can write your math on, so you can do calculations. You will be provided a small calculator. The only thing you'll have to remember with math are the equations going into the exam. First big note I have for you for taking the exam, memorize the equations, and right when you go to sit down and taking the exam, write the equations out. The equations you'll have to remember are going to be cost of goods sold. You're going to have to, if some of you that have run businesses before, this will be a little bit easier for you, but you're going to have to determine pricing, cost of goods sold, markups you're going to have to do, as well as there's going to be a formula for finding out the percentage of fat in dry matter. That one was a little bit tougher for me. The rest of them, being a manager, I'd done enough, but we'll go through that. That'll be a specific class when we go through math. So we'll hit up on that. Don't worry about it. Other than that, so you're going to be sitting there. It's going to be a little chilly, and we'll review all this too. It'll be a little chilly in the room, so you do get to take like a coat or a cardigan. If you get cold, I would suggest doing that. Other than that, I remember when I took the test, I was one of the last people to leave the room. I'd been in cheese for a long time. I thought I knew the world, when I sat down. But also know that there's no prize for being the first person out of the room. Nobody cares that you took the test faster than everybody else. If you're that great at taking tests, wonderful. If not, leave your ego at the door and take as much time as you need to go over the test and make sure you filled out all the circles right. All right. Okay, so coming back to that, I know that's kind of simple. And again, we'll review this. My goal is to also, the test is going to be on the 20th of July. We'll review that again, the 20th of July. Go ahead and put that on your calendar. On the 19th, we're going to have an all-day review session before the exam. So, so planning your trip to ACS, please try to arrive on the 18th. If you would like to take an all-day review exam where I get cheesemakers to come in and they give quick little reviews. I get about 8 cheesemakers. They get about an hour each, and they kind of help review each of the domains. So you get to hear it from somebody else other than me. So plan on that on the 19th. The exam blueprint. Now here is what this really covers. And I've got a larger picture. We should see that on our screens now. But the ACS CCP Exam Blueprint. It's a little fuzzy. It's not my fault. I blame other people. But if you're looking at this, there's 11 domains over here on the left. The domains of knowledge, which are going to be over here. Health regulation, food safety is 1. Operations is number 2. Cheese history, definitions, categorization is number 3. Milk is number 4. Cheese making is number 5. Ripening is number 6. Assessment and evaluation is number 7. Selling and transporting is number 8. Inventory management is number 9. Service is number 10. And business principles and practice is number 11. And domains basically is, the domains we're talking about is how they've broken it down. The domains came about as a way for the test writers, the question writers, to break out the different levels of how the cheese industry is. So it's more about how the, what affects everybody in the cheese industry. So you'll see, even we got these domains, they go all across this board. It's a lot of good colors, right? So from that, they've even broken it down into task areas. So domains, task areas, don't get confused by that. Don't let it bog you down. I'm going to walk you through this. So the task area means business practices. And where do these business practices come from? And if you see here, also they give you an idea that 25 questions or 17% of this test is going to come from business practices. For those of you who operate in sales, own a business, are a buyer, all of that, you probably have a good grasp on this, but you got to know that business practices goes through every single domain. So my point is, while studying and looking at this information, and you're wondering, what should I study? What's going on? Think about all the things, and if it affects everybody in the industry. This test isn't just for cheesemongers. This test is for cheesemongers, cheesemakers, buyers, sales teams, distributors, importers. It covers a lot of this, even transportation. It covers a lot of all the jobs in the cheese industry. So this test was really designed and built around to answer the question, how could we set a base level of knowledge for everybody, So this is what we're going to see and what we're going to talk about as far as how we're going to study for this exam. If it matters to the whole group, then we know it's important enough to study. If it's a minuscule, odd kind of thing that only affects one small group, then it's probably not the most important thing in the industry and not really worth one of the 150 questions, if that makes sense. So besides the tab, you have business practices, procuring product, receiving product, managing inventory, selling product, food safety and documentation. And the good thing is they broke it down here for you. 17% business practices, 10% or 15 questions are going to be about procuring product. 13 questions are going to be about receiving product. That means things like knowing what a bill of lading is. I would actually write that down. Also, a quick note on my training style. If I do a wink, wink, nudge, nudge, that means you're going to get asked a question on. I can't tell you what the question is going to be, but that means write it down because that's going to be a question some way. Managing inventory, we love inventory, right? Selling product is 48 questions. So a big bulk, almost a third of the test is about selling product. And that covers, you see how this blue really covers an aspect of all of the domains. So we know that selling product is going to be a huge part, as well as 25 questions are going to be food safety. If you're a Serve Safe certified individual, like some of our chefs and our restaurant staff are, that's great. You'll probably do really well on this section. But actually, we view everything anyway. But food safety, of course, think about it. Food safety affects us all in this industry from milking to digesting. So we know that food safety is a huge issue. That means anything that comes up on this website about food safety is going to be fair game for you to study. Excellent. And that's and we're going to go through this now. So now I'm going to kind of I can email this blueprint to you. And this is what's referred to as the body of knowledge, and we've got it written out in a different way. There's a lot of information, so so just hang tight with how we have everything broken out. Okay, now we're going back to the website. So those of you who joined us just a smidge late, thank you for popping on, and also know that we are I'm visiting the Cheese Society website right now. You should be able to see my screen of the website up. If you can't, shoot me a chat or let me know. Okay, so that's the preparation guide looking at the exam blueprint underneath the application process. So I just clicked on ACS exam preparation guide. Now we want to hit our body of, let me go back. Our body of knowledge. Where is my, right here. So body of knowledge. This is a great page as far as making sure that having the domains written out in a different way. We all learn things differently. I myself, I'm from Alabama. I grew up in Alabama. I'm a little slow. I've got to see it, hear it, and say it. And then it's kind of in my brain. So that's kind of the way I teach. Some of you may pick things up faster. That's amazing. But you have the ability here to download the body of knowledge, the expanded version. And we're going to cover that in just a second. But here, let's just go into, just to show you all these different domains, other resources for you to study. Domain 1, I'm just going to click into that. And we see that it's going to take us to health regulations, food safety. So the domain 1 focuses with health benefits, health concerns, and the regulations, the governing cheese industry procedures. So regulatory bodies, you got to know the FDA, the USDA, the Department of Agriculture. Most of you, again, may already be exposed to these, but you're also going to need to know the acronyms for everything. Besides the fact of maybe being asked, you know, what is the FDA accountable for in the cheese industry, you got to know what the FDA is. They may just use that acronym in a sentence, if that makes sense. So regulatory bodies, registrations and licensings, milk, importing and exporting, product labeling and dating, good manufacturing practices. I'd highlight that. GMPs are on the exam. Inspections, investigations, and targeted sampling, food safety. And again, a lot of you probably already know about this, but keep it up. The Food Safety Modernization Act, food safety plan, a food defense plan, record keeping, third-party audits, and training programs. So all of this is fair game for domain 1. For those first, I think what we say that was domain 1 gets 25 questions, the business practices. So now let's check domain 1, what resources they're giving us. And this is going to be up to you as part of your study to go through and read. So it's like, oh my God. So we got domain 1 and all these other resources here. So I just wanted to point out like one. I'm going to click on lactose intolerance and look at this resource. This is a blurb. The thing about all those resources is they're not so long. It's like, oh my God, it's not too much information. But even from the start, people with lactose intolerance are unable to fully digest the sugar, which is lactose, in milk. As a result, they have diarrhea, gas, and bloating after eating or drinking dairy products. The condition, which is also called lactose malabsorption, is usually harmless, but its symptoms can sometimes be uncomfortable. All right, so if I'm reading that and I'm trying to study for this exam, the part that's going to help you as you're going through here studying is turning these statements into your own questions. One of the downsides to this exam, it's a great exam and I stand by it wholeheartedly, but the questions were not put together by professional test question writers. They were put together and they were orchestrated, created by people in the cheese industry, very intelligent people in the cheese industry, mind you. But what that means is the questions, like, it's almost like I didn't write all the questions, but imagine if I wrote questions to the exam. I would try to make them clear, but this is the way I would go about it. And it's the kind of the way I want you to perceive it too. Just imagine yourself as a test writer, as a question writer, and read something and say, well, how can that be turned into a question? What is lactose intolerance? So then you say, then the answer could be A, B, C, or D, right? Lactose intolerance is the inability to digest sugar in milk. That could be an answer. That could be one of the answers of what is lactose intolerance. One of the questions could be, what is another term for lactose intolerance? And you could have letter A could be lactose non-digesto, or B would be lactose malabsorption. C could be something else. But you see what I mean? That's where I would pull these question from and think about how the answers are written. It's not their goal for the CCP to truly trick you or just to make a fool out of you with these questions. They do want you to think and know, but it's not going to be so tricky. So that would be things that I would, like, if I were reading that paragraph, I think it's more important to know that it's also called lactose malabsorption. That's a key thing to write down. And again, turn this into a flashcard. And I think that's easy to go. So what happens with that? Too little of an enzyme produced in your small intestine, lactase. Oh my God, that could be a question or should be a card. Like, what is the enzyme produced in the small intestine to help digest lactose? Lactase. That would be somewhere. That's a way to think about everything while you're reading. I hope that makes sense for everybody. But of course, you're accountable for a lot of this, and it could be, oh my God, you come down to symptoms. It could be one of those big questions where, what is the best answer for the symptoms a lactose intolerant person gets after drinking milk? And you would know that it needs to be all of these, right? Okay, so that's just an example. I'm not going to go through each and every one of these, but that's how I just wanted to get you kicked off at studying for this. And I know that's a lot of information. You're like, oh my God, Nathan, that's a good deal. Of course it is, but we're gonna digest it a little bit more, right? Whew. So you know the body of knowledge. We talked a little bit about what the day of the test is going to review. For those of you who just joined us, remember the test is July 20th. It is in Portland, Oregon. The last 2 years, this exam has been given virtually. This year, to my current knowledge, this test will not be offered virtually. This test will be offered in person at the conference in Portland at the end of July on the 20th. And also, again, don't forget that to be there the 19th for our all-day review session. Okay. So that's a lot of information. Oh my goodness, that goes into a lot. Other than that, so certifications, we read up on that. Just know too, for the eligibility and criteria to be able to take the exam, you've had to have worked at least 4,000 hours, or basically if you've worked 2 years full-time with cheese, you're good to go. That means if you own a shop that sells cheese, if you're a cheese buyer for a company, if you're a salesperson that sells specialty cheese, if you're a deli, if you're a cheesemonger, or even a deli manager in a grocery store that sells specialty cheese, you've been in the group and you've got it. So you don't have to worry about that. And again, I just want to remind everybody to make sure that you do apply as soon as possible. And don't forget that $35 fee. Other resources. Now, I kind of want to go by, and these things are the major things to study. You do have the option, though, recommended. 3 books are recommended. I believe I've already sent out that email, but everything's backwards, of course. I apologize. But this is American Farmstead Cheese by Paul Kensett. That's Mateo Keller from Jasper Hill on the cover when he was a young person. But this book is a recommended reading for the exam. Mastering Cheese. This is by Max McKellen and David Gibbons. This is also, you see I've got my notes. I've been reading in it a lot. This is recommended reading for the exam. Where you're going to see, this is going to be more science. This is going to be more cheese knowledge as far as on the sales side. And then, of course, the ever handy Oxford Companion to Cheese. This is a big, thick tome. The main thing to study in here are going to be our European protected cheeses. And I'll actually have a class where I go through and kind of narrow down. They list loads of cheeses in here, but I help you narrow down to like take it from 200 to like the top 50 to 75 to study to kind of give you a little bit more help there. All righty, let's put that over here. So when just looking at this website, just reading through here, it gives you questions to the test without telling you right off the bat. So just by looking at cheese definitions, all I did was click on that. The definition of milk and cheese. You think that's important for the test? You bet your bottom dollar. That is on the test. So this right here, milk is defined. Also know that the Pasteurized Milk Ordinance, that's a PMO. As silly as it sounds, I would literally write out every single acronym that you run across on a card, and on the back write what it is. You're going to have to know all these acronyms because they can either ask you a question as to what it means, or they could just use it in a sentence, assuming that you know what it means. And if you don't know what it means, you're going to have a higher chance of missing that question. So the normal lacteal secretion, practically free of colostrum, obtained by the complete milking of one or more healthy hooved animals. So that's what the PMO has. The American Cheese Society will not, and I agree, we will not ask questions or even think about nut juices referred to as milk. Milk comes from mammals, from animals. And that's just the way it is, especially that going into this test. If you disagree, that's on you. But besides that, we know it's the normal lacterial secretion. Colostrum. Just by reading this one sentence, I have identified the opportunity for 2 questions. What is colostrum? If you don't know it, that is the first milking, maybe the first 2 milkings of the hooved animal, where it is imperative that the baby hooved animal gets that milk, because that's the milk that contains a vast amount of bacteria that goes into the baby's digestive system and help lines it and gives that baby animal all that healthy bacteria that grows in them to help them digest food. We as human beings do not digest colostrum. We don't want it. That's for the babies. So anyway, 2 questions out of just that one. Next, even looking at this, cheese. So the Codex Alimentarius provides global standards for the definition of cheese. Cheese is the ripened or unripened, soft, semi-hard, hard, or extra hard product which may be coated and in which the whey protein or casein ratio does not exceed that of milk. So now we're getting a little bit more convoluted. It's a little more lawyery sounding in there, right? But here, know the difference between this. Know that ACS is going to define milk, as well as, here we go, as well as the Code of Federal Regulations. So cheese, so in the United States, cheese is defined in the Code of Regulations as the fresh or matured product obtained by draining after coagulation of milk, cream, skimmed or partly skimmed milk, or a combination of some or all the products, and including any cheese that confirms the requirements of the Food and Drug Administration. There's a question in there. Main thing to remember, lacterial secretion, free of colostrum. That's going to be on the test. Wink. That is, you've already got three questions right now, just from watching already. So besides that, you're going into describing, categorizing, and classifying cheese. I'm going to read through here and let's see if we can get more questions. There are multiple ways to describe, organize, and classify cheese, including texture, milk type, and place of origin. Just by reading that one sentence, I see a question. Let me, if I can highlight it well for you. you know, what are the ways, what are some of the multiple ways to describe and classify cheese? And they can give you A, B, C, and D, you know, pick which one best fits. So texture, milk type, place of origin. They could have white blood cell count. They could put anything else down there, but that would be a good way to look at that test. Regardless of classification system, many varieties of cheese cross over from one category to another. For instance, Gouda style cheese can be sold to customers of many different ages and therefore textures. It can have a natural or waxed rind, and it may be different in other milk types, and can be produced in Europe across the United States. Not a lot of reading that. I don't really see a question in there. So skim through some of that. With all this reading material, it's imperative that you read through, see what screams out to you. And that's where I'm here to help you. Again, like, if there's something that looks like a definition or clear 1, 2, 3 points that go into it, that could be a question. Some of the rest of it is just convoluted verbiage, you know, to get us to the meat of the matter. But standards of identity. So just going through here, the U.S. Food and Drug Administration, FDA, we know that's important. Got to know that. Maintains and enforces standards of identity for cheese for 72 cheese and cheese products. That sounds like it could be a question, right? That sounds like a specific thing that the FDA is accountable for. So I would go through and highlight that and make sure that I think about how they could turn that into a question. Each specific standard of identity can be found. Also look up standard of identity. If you don't know what it is, this is a time for you to study. Again, I'm not going to give you everything. I'm going to point you in the right direction, and it's going to be up to you to read and study all this stuff, right? Let's see, the Code of Regulations or the Code of Federal Regulations. You got to know what that is anytime you see this. And also, the major point I'm getting to right here, which you've probably already gotten, if it's on their website, it's probably going to be on the exam. I know we've got books to study. I'll take you through some of these books, good information. But I'm going to tell you, 75% of this test is just what on this website and the links to it, if not 80%. So a majority of the exam is just right here, okay? All righty. So you know how to read that. Milk source and production. They're giving you right here. Look at all of these bolded words. You think that's going to be on the test? Absolutely. Each and every one of these is on the exam. Nice and easy for you. Artisan. So the cheese produced primarily by hand in small batches with particular attention paid to the tradition of the cheesemaker's art, and thus using as little mechanization as possible in the production of cheese. That's the definition of artisan. You probably wink, wink, want to write that down. That's a big one. That's big in our world. Farmstead. Oh my God. I know for a fact Farmstead Cheeses is on this exam. Farmstead is like the upper echelon in our American cheese world, right? The cheese must be primarily made by hand with milk from the farmer's own herd or flock on the farm where the animals are raised. Milk used in the production of Farmstead cheeses may not be obtained from any other outside source. That could be a question. If they ask if it can be obtained from outside source, absolutely not. Care and attention must be paid to the purity, quality, and flavor of the milk. The cheese must be ripened naturally with emphasis on development of characteristic flavor and texture without the use of shortcuts and techniques to increase yield. That's a major thing too. Is like there's no, where you talk about mechanical, when you add in a lot of mechanization, right? You're cheating the system a little bit. You could heat some young cheeses to kind of make them more aged. But here they're saying, no, you can't do that. You got to actually age the cheese. So that's the main thing. Respect for the traditions and history of cheese making are expected regardless the size of production. So Farmstead, there's no American law, like the protected cheeses of Europe with the DOPs and the AOCs and the DOs and the PDOs, where they protect the cheese making. Here in America, this is our effort. Like Farmstead, would be the first thing. If we ever came out with an American PDO, that would be the elevated one. So we know that's going to be on the exam. Then specialty. Specialty cheese is defined as a cheese of limited production with particular attention paid to natural flavor and texture profiles. So all of that's important. I would absolutely know each of those. Oh my God, and I wouldn't stop there. There's so many notes. So now you know 10 questions that are going to be on the exam. Milk treatment. All of this unpasteurized. I don't know all of you personally on this call, but I'm aware of you and your professionalism. Everybody that's on here. All of you know what pasteurization is. I know that. All of you know what raw milk is. But know the definitions set forth by the American Cheese Society. Even if the Oxford Companion to Cheese gives a definition of what milk or cheese is, use the ACS definition. Wink. That's what you need to know. So this is where I really I always push all my students for CCP, start at this website. So unpasteurized or raw means the milk has not been subjected to heat treatment before cheese making begins. Nice and easy. That's one question. Second question, which is highly important, wink, that you're going to get asked. The current regulations in the United States allow for the sale of cheese made from unpasteurized milk if the cheese is aged for typically 60 days or more at a temperature greater than 35 degrees Fahrenheit. So cheese has to be 60 days or older. That's my cheese 101 when I talk to beginning mongers. But once now that we get up to our, what I like to call, it's even past, this is our graduate level class. Anytime it lists a temperature, memorize that. 35 degrees to 2 degrees Celsius. I do not recall a lot any so-called math of are them trying to trick you with Fahrenheit versus Celsius or having to know how to convert Fahrenheit to Celsius. Focus on just what they are. The only trick I think they would throw in there is they would switch them and say 2 degrees Fahrenheit, 35 degrees Celsius. That may be the only way, but know that 60 days at 35 degrees Fahrenheit, that's the way to go. And more often than not, you will get asked Fahrenheit. It is the American Cheese Society. We are one of the last holdouts in the world is using imperial measurement. So we'll probably hold on to that for a minute. So don't fret too much. Pasteurization. I'm not going to hit up on all these. I know, we've only got an hour left, but hopefully you're really seeing the importance that the information is already laid out for you. It's all here. I always like to say it's hidden in plain sight. But pasteurization is the process named after French scientist Louis Pasteur. That could be a question. That's easily a question. And hopefully most of you probably already know that, right? So just put that one in your bank. That applies to heat to destroy pathogens in food. That's a good way to put it. That would be the verbiage that would be on the exam. Again, even if Max McCallan says something different in his book, go by what the website says. Go by what the American Cheese Society has written down, and you'll be better for that. Let's see. But knowing that it applies heat to destroy pathogens, that I think is a good way to word it. For the dairy industry, the term pasteurization, pasteurized, and similar terms mean the process of heating every particle of milk or milk product in properly designed and operated equipment. The thing is, of course, it's got to be properly designed and operated. That's not what needs to stick in your head. If there's any degrees, specific, that's what you need to remember, okay? And then, of course, I would know what the Pasteurized Milk Ordinance is, PMO. That's another acronym. For those who joined us a little bit late, I made a point. Every acronym you see on this website, write it down, know what it is. And here are two other things that are on the test. Now that's going to be 12 questions that you already know. But pasteurization, high temperature, short time. HTST is 100% on the exam, the same as pasteurization, low temperature, long time. So high temperature, high time, what does that sound like? High temperature, short time. See, I don't want to confuse you. A legal pasteurization step which ensures that milk has been heated to a minimum of 161 degrees Fahrenheit or 71.6 degrees Celsius for at least 15 seconds. Now, also known as continuous flow pasteurization. I see two questions possibly out of that. Number one, you will have to match the temperature to the name. So they will give A, B, C, D. A could be 159 degrees Fahrenheit, 69.2 degrees Celsius. Answer B would be 161 Fahrenheit, 71 degrees. See what I mean? They would change it up a little bit, and you would have to match the temperature to the title. Next, they could ask, what is another name for HTST? See where they may not even give you the full name of it. They may just give you the acronym, and you would have to know it's also known as continuous flow pasteurization. All right, hopefully you're really starting to see. I know my mind is a crazy place, but hopefully you see where I'm coming from as far as you're reading, what should stick out in your brain, and literally what you should write down. So 2 questions out of that one. Let's see, what else is pasteurization? Low temperature, long time. And those of us, we've been in the cheese world, we can deduce. It's like, oh, it's low temperature, so it's going to be a lower temperature and have more time, right? Instead of 15 seconds, we're going to be looking at 30 minutes. So a legal pasteurization step, which ensures milk has been heated to 145 Fahrenheit for a minimum of 30 minutes. Also known as vat pasteurization. Again, each of these could provide to you on the exam 2 questions each. You need to know that what it stands for, what temperature it is, and that secondary name. They could also just use vat pasteurization. If they wanted to make it hard, they could say, using vat pasteurization, what are the temperatures and time for pasteurizing milk? Oh, crap. They didn't say anything about low temperature or long time, so know that they're interchangeable. Okay? This is so much fun for me. I'm nerding out so much right now. This is great. So ACS judging and competition categories. When I start my cheese trainings on the ground, I usually teach new cheesemongers or whatnot. So I'm doing a lot of 101s, right? So I categorize cheese in 10 ways to keep it easy for people who are just starting out in cheese. They're a little different than these ways. And what do you think they're going to ask on the Acs Ccp exam? My ways of categorizing cheese or their ACS judging and competition categories? They're going to ask their ways. These are the categories of cheese to know for the exam. They're listing them out here for you. And they could absolutely ask you this. It is important for the ACS that people who have certified the CCP know the way they categorize cheese. So they will ask you questions about this. Fresh unripened cheese. These cheeses are not aged and have a high moisture content range of 40 to 80%. If they give you numbers, that means that's fair game to get asked about. It may be a good way to help you remember. Fresh unripened, 40 to 80% moisture, 40 to 80% moisture, fresh unripened. It's fresh. That means it's a lot of moisture. However you can get it in your head, know what that means, because they could ask a question being like, in the ACS judging and competition categories, what is the moisture range needed for fresh unripened cheeses? 20 to 30. 40 to 50, 60 to 70, 40 to 80. And you would have to choose D, 40 to 80. So that's how the test is written and goes. I know I'm running this into the ground, but the more you realize this is the way it is, the more your brain's going to pick it up. And hopefully as you read along, my voice will start popping out and be like, oh, I probably need to know that. So that's what you need to know out of here. Other than that, let's keep reading that and see if it's important. Federal law dictates that cheese aged less than 60 days must be made from pasteurized milk. They mention that twice on the same page. What level of importance do you think that holds to the American Cheese Society? High level of importance. So that's going to be on your test. No ifs, ands, or buts. How they question it, I don't know, but it's going to be on there. Other than that, let's see. In terms of taste, this category of cheese is often defined by characteristically mild lactic flavors. They could even ask that. What are the in the category of fresh unripened cheeses? What characteristic flavors do you find in there? Again, you see, I'm not a professional test writer, but mild lactic flavors accompanied by a tangy finish. Not that's probably got a lower chance of being a question, but there's still a chance. But examples include fresh cheese curds, Fraichèvre, mascarpone, cream cheese, ricotta, quark, fromage blanc, cottage cheeses. That could easily be a question. Like that's a fun little game. Like write it down, see if your family can help you study, find a study partner and ask each other this. But I would say that if they list these out, that would be the first cheeses they go to ask about on the test. Like they've listed these out as fresh, unripened cheeses. So I would know about these cheeses and know that they fall into that category. I'm not going to read through every single one of these because, we got a lot to cover today, but hopefully, again, you're seeing. But I do want to cover soft ripened cheeses. Cheeses in this category are characterized by blooming mold development of Penicillium candidum. I would know that. I would look Penicillium candidum up and know that that's the bloomy rind, your brie style cheeses. That's the mold on the outside. Although often accompanied by other funguses such as yeast, Geotrichum. Boom, that's another question. That's what could trick you up. They could call or question in some way and treat Geotrichum. I'm going to highlight that on the screen as well. Call that a mold. No, that's where they could trick you. It's a yeast. So that's something to study. The overall appearance of the cheese is what they have: a thin, white, flossy rind encased in semi-soft interior paste that breaks down and becomes softer as the cheese matures. I would probably focus more on the beginning of that, but to know that soft ripened cheeses, they're brie styles. They become gooey as they age. With a moisture content, they list another moisture content. So maybe what I'd do, if I were studying this, I would write down fresh unripened cheeses, put down their moisture contents, that they have to be aged over 60 days, and write down the examples. When I get to soft ripened cheeses, again, I would write down this moisture content. It's less, right? I mean, it could be somewhat similar, excuse me, but it's a different percentage. So I would remember what the ACS qualifies this for, because this is for cheese makers as they're sending in their cheeses to be judged, literally. But other than that, let's just, examples of soft ripened cheeses include brie and camembert style cheeses. So this means, and I'm not kidding, brie and camembert are on the test. Brie de Meaux. I would write that down. Let's see if I can get that in the chat and spell it right for you. If you know it, awesome. X, not a Z. Brie de Meaux. That is, I would look that up. I would know what brie de Meaux is. I would know what camembert is. I hope you're all taking notes right now. I would know where camembert comes from, Normandy, and where the recipe come from. What lady in Normandy helped save the recipe for camembert. I would know that. Wink. That's a good thing to know. Other than that, American cheeses. Do you think they're going to ask you about American cheeses at the American Cheese Society? Yes. So I would look up Humboldt Fog. I would know who invented it. I would know what cheesemaker. I would know the story. I would want to know that Mary King, when she came up with the idea to put the vegetable ash in the center, that it was meant to be there to resemble the fog coming in off the bay. I know that sounds crazy, but that's part of the cheesemonger part, and that goes into the selling tips. That's very well probably going to be on your test. And then French classics. So if they list it here on this page, I would know what Saint Andre, Colomiers, and Explorateur are. I would put that in my cheese bank to know. And they do this with every single thing on here. Again, I'm not going to read every bit of this to you. Now you're trying to see where I am, but look, Monterey Jack, Dry Jack, when it goes into American Originals is a big deal. The fact that we have original cheeses, sorry about that. We have original cheeses here in the United States. The ACS is going to want to push that, don't you think? So they would probably put those at a higher level of importance. And plus they got them listed out. Monterey Jack, Dry Jack. I would write down Dry Jack, Vella Dry Jack. I'm going to give you a good hint. Vella Dry Jack. I would look up that cheese and know everything there is to know about it. I'd know about the man Vella. I would know about who he was. He played a big role in the cheese world as far as California and even Oregon. That's on the test. Brick cheese, Munster, Colby, Teleme. I remember being asked about Teleme. So if they have it on, this is what I mean. It's like everybody's scrambling just to go study the books and do all this. Start here at the website. There's so much information handed to you that is on the test for you just to grab to study. International styles. Just continuing up with this, let's see. This category for ACS competition is specifically designed to encompass the many cheeses made within the Americas that are inspired by or based upon established cheeses originating overseas, especially in Europe. For judging purposes, although also of international origin, the competition further breaks down out of Italian styles, feta, Hispanic styles. So they break it down a little bit further. They're probably not going to get that. Like, I would know the bigger categories. They're not going to spend all of their time, if they only have 150 questions, asking you to break down the international style. That's not the biggest importance. The biggest importance, though, is the cheeses they list right here. Holy crap. Reference that list with this book, and you're going to be on a good start. They're going to ask you about, like if they have it on here, abondance, great cheese, Beaufort, Butterkas, carefully. Dutch cheeses, they're going to ask you about, such as Edam, Emmental. Emmental cheese is like the quintessential cheese. Like, that's the cheese that's on the emojis. You know, like that's what, when people think about cheese, they think about the big cheese with the big eyes in it. They, you know, you kind of envision an Emmental piece. It's a huge cheese to know. But not only did they say Emmental cheese, but they wrote down specifically made from cow's milk and having eye formation. Eye formation is going to be on the test. They're handing it right here to you. Study eye formation. What is it that gives us eye formation? It's the cultures. But know about it, read it. Gruyere. Gruyere is absolutely on the test. Gruyere is one of the kings of cheeses. I would know about that and their grading. Gruyere and even Comté. I would know all about Comté as well. But here, traditional English cheeses, excluding cheddars and blues. So you got Lancashire, Cheshire. I recall questions about those cheeses on the test. Wink. Know about it. I always have trouble saying this one. Justalapia cheese, know that. If it's got it listed down here, know it. Monostatic cheeses. Cheddars, again, I kind of want to go through all these, but I want to go to another tool for you to study. But please read this page. Go through each of these categories. If it lists a specific cheese, that means it's probably going to be on your test. It's right there for you. But the thing to know about cheddars, my biggest hint about that, cheddars, you can come from certain counties in England. Know what counties cheddars can come from in England. So if you've listened to me from the start, literally 20 questions out of the exam you've already covered just today. This is how studying should go. So don't freak out. I know there's a lot on the exam, and like we're going to cover some more deeper information, but I just wanted to show you again how, like, just going back to blue molds. Well, here they've got cloth bound. Know what cloth bound is. Bandage wrap. Know what that is. Versus block. I would know in blue cheese. They list out Penicillium roqueforti versus Penicillium glaucum. Know that those are the molds that go into blue cheese. Know. And they list out specific blue cheeses, y'all. Know these. Roquefort, absolutely on the test. Roquefort was the first cheese ever to get a designation of origin protection label. You may need to know that. But you also need to know, this is where we're going to get even more specific with our studying. Say you're studying Roquefort. You know that, it got its certification in 1925. It was the first. All right. But what's the breed of sheep? You know, you got to know, number one, you got to know it's sheep milk, not cow milk, but it comes with a specific breed of sheep. If there is a specific breed with a protected cheese, the Lagoon sheep, you got to know that. The same thing with Manchego. You're going to need to know Manchego has a specific breed of sheep that goes with that. That's going to be, Manchega. sheep. That's easy. Easy enough, right? But if it lists anything out here, Stilton, that's going to be on there. Bailey, Hazen, Blue. That's an American. I would know absolutely about Bailey, Hazen, Blue. What do you like? Where do they even get the name for it? Who makes it? Jasper Hill Cellars, Blue Delverne, all these. Point Reyes Original Blue. The thing is, if they've listed it on this page, you have a much higher chance that they're going to ask you a question about it. Okay, whoo, I could go through this page all day long. Please read this. Again, they go through Farmstead Cheeses again. That means it's important. So please know, even wash rind cheeses, there's a lot on here. So the wash rind cheeses, they give you Epoisse, Livarot, Taleggio. So again, after listening to me today, do you think those are going to be on the test? More than likely. More than likely. You know, even two other cheeses to study. I got to cover these. This is just too easy. Low-hanging fruit here for us to study. Alsatian Munster, Chimay, Epoisse, listed again. Langres, I would know Langres right here. I would know that it's got a sweet little dimple in that cheese. And what do we pour in that little dimple? Look it up. Limburger, Pont l'Evêque, Saint Nectaire, Taleggio on there again. Taleggio, I remember talking about it being made with tired milk. I'd write down what tired milk means. And then, of course, what some of you, and this is when I talk to most of my teams that are taking this, especially if they're working in grocery stores across the U.S., they probably never had Vacherin Mont d'Or. Vacherin Mont d'Or is one of the upper echelon of cheeses throughout the entire world. What to know about it, and I'm going to give you a good heads up. It's made only in a specific time frame. And know that any cheese you come across, if it's made in a specific time frame, know that that's going to be important, and that's going to be on the test. Okay? Other cheeses like that. There's an American cheese. Let me go back to Blue. Did they mention, or did we get to Blue's cheese yet? Anyway, what I was going to talk about with blue cheeses is no Rogue River Blue. Rogue River Blue is, you know, it won best cheese in the world. So do you think that's going to be on the test? Probably. Like, that's a huge badge of honor for the American Cheese Society. An American cheese winning best cheese in the world. You bet your bottom dollar they're going to ask you about that. Other than that, things to study that aren't right on this particular page, but I would look up ACS award-winning cheeses in the past. I would know, like, they're going to want to push. Again, they're talking about, they want us to speak with the same language and know the same cheeses. So ideally, they're going to want you to know what I have always referred to as the big dogs. I think the old world cheeses, you know, Gruyere, Comté, Roquefort, Manchego, Reggiano, you know, the big dogs. You got to know those, but then come back to America. You got to know the American cheeses, the American producers. Not only do you know what Rogue River is, like what time of year is it made? It's along one of the equinoxes. Who makes it? You got to know that David Grimmels is attached to it, right? If you've been selling cheese, hopefully some of that's already in your mind. Other than that, look at here. You've got methods of coagulation. Acid coagulations or lactic cheeses. Absolutely know about that. Coagulation by acid and heat. Know what that is. Rennet coagulated. That's basically your aged cheeses. Know the different types of rennet. It's all here for you. All here for you. Love it. Any questions about that so far? Haven't had any questions or comments, so I'm thinking everything's rolling good. Hopefully we're still listening and paying attention. Don't worry, sometimes I do get people nodding off. All right, so just that one page, guys. I guess I'll say team, but just this one page under cheese definitions and categories. That's a huge page, 20, at least 20 questions just on one page. Nice and easy, right? So this is where my goal is to help you take all this information and show you what's important. So let's keep moving down then. So we talked about all that, and that's just different parts of the category. Now let's go to the ACS Lexicon and Glossary. All right, excuse me one second. So this is, again, this is their way of the ACS, all this paragraph, I can sum it up for you. The fact, you read it though. But the fact of the matter is the cheese industry is, even though it's tiny, we know that it's still kind of small, but it's still vast. And that means that people can speak with a different language. People can use different terminologies or try to use terminology in whatever way they want. One of the main goals for the ACS and in this test is to get all of us to speak with the same language, to use the same terms. So that means their terms are going to matter a great deal. You're going to imagine a great deal to this test. So go into the ACS Lexicon and Glossary. You can download it. I've emailed all this to you. If you've on here, if you already received my email where I emailed it to you, but just to show you, you can just pull this up here. And there we go. The Lexicon and Glossary, all right here. There's a lot of pages. There's a lot of stuff right there. We don't need to read that just yet. But here we go. At about page 6, we really get into our Lexicon and Glossary. So you are accountable for knowing each of these. These are, again, I would suggest flashcards. No matter how silly you think it is, flashcards are a huge help because of the fact that, and I don't provide them for you, because the thing about flashcards is you have to write it. You have to look it up, read it, write it, and say it. So if you do that, you're putting this information in your head 3 different ways, and you're going to more likely remember that. And again, this test is more about memorization than anything else, okay? So memorize. Let's see. And if it's on here, you're good to know. So the green apple flavor, probably good to know, but probably maybe not the most important. Like it's good, but it's there. Acid, that affects us all. I would say acid would probably be a little bit higher term that go up there. Ammonia and ammoniated. That's huge. That's a big sign of spoilage. What is that? So ammonia. Ammonia associated with cat urine, often associated with soft-ripened cheeses that have been aged too long. So just to know also that that's a sign of spoilage, overripe, if you look at these related terms. But what could be a question is what leads to the ammonia smell in overripe brie? Where one of the answers would be breakdown of protein and production of ammonia with excessive proteolysis and extended storage. That would be how a question would come about on the test. So again, I would look then, well, crap, I need to know proteolysis. That's, I don't know how to tell you 1,000 times on the test. Absolutely know that. And we'll probably get it up when we come to the next definition. I'm not going to read every definition to you, don't worry, but I do want to go through the time and kind of hit some highlights as maybe what's more important versus not. So hopefully that'll work for you. Animal is a good way to describe a flavor. But again, please note, you're accountable for all of this. I'm just going to try to narrow down what I think is the best place to study. Animal is good. Know that it's kind of associated with the flavor of an animal. It's animally. Appearance, of course, an attribute that encompasses the variety of terms used to describe the visual appearance of cheese body and rind development characteristics. That sounds like a good question to me. Wink. That sounds like a good question. And then aroma, of course, aroma, because this has it's an overarching thing that deals with everything in the cheese world with appearance and aroma, because appearance can be good or bad, right? So know about that. Astringent, atypical. I remember more things like bitter. Bitter can be an attribute or a defect. We're going to be using terms attribute and defect, good and bad. I remember blind being asked. Definition of the absence of eyes in a cheese expected to have eyes. So if you got like a piece of Emmentaler that was solid, that cheese is blind. But then again, some cheeses should be blind and then get too many eyes, and that could be a defect, right? So it could go back and forth. So you need to know not only what it is, but where it's expected and where it's not. Bleaching. Bleaching, we all know that defect found in flavored yogurt visualized by streaking of white yogurt throughout the yogurt body. There's a lot of stuff about yogurt. There's not the biggest focus on yogurt in the test. So I would be familiar with these. But I feel like, if you get a yogurt question, there may be one or two total where it's really going to be centered a lot more around cheese, but yogurt, butter, it's all fair game, right? Side note, they do change questions every year. They change anywhere from 15 to 30 questions every single year that the exam goes through. So what I remember from 2018, there could be an entirely new test. I'm sure there's some very similar questions though. So I wouldn't worry too much, but blown, 100% know what that is. Absolutely, that's going to be on your test. Frothy, buttery's cool. Buttery's a nice description, probably on your test. Cabbage, I would know cabbage on your test. Wink. Calcium lactate, big one. I would study that. Know that calcium lactate crystals can appear as pinpoints or as a diffuse white haze on cheddar-type cheeses. They can also be found on the interior. It's less common on the inside, but calcium lactate crystals are often confused with tyrosine crystals. They're not the same thing. So know what it is. Possible cause is calcium level is beyond saturation point, and it precipitates out due to rapid or excess acid production. Freeway in package or elevated storage temperatures. So know that that's more along the lines of cheddars. Okay, so that's a big one to know. Caramel, probably. Cheesy, maybe. Closed, coarse. Collapsed. I remember collapsed because they do. I do think they sometimes get into a lot of the defects on this test. Related terms, we already talked about blown. Cabbage eyes, we talked about. We haven't gotten there yet, but frog mouth. You need to know what frog mouth is. It's more than that. But it's other defect. Color, they do talk about a little bit. Cooked. You need to know what cooked is just to use it in a sentence. Corky. Don't remember a lot about corky being on the test. Cracked or cracks, you got to know. Crumbly. Crystals, also see calcium lactate, tyrosine crystals. Let's see. Curdy, dull, earthy. It's just a good way to describe cheese. Elasticity. Eyes, absolutely on the test. Oh, goodness, know what eyes are. For the love of all that's cheesy. Eyes is on your exam. Let's see. Know your possible causes. And again, know that it is in some places an attribute and in some places it's a defect. And more than likely, you're going to get asked questions about those terms that could be both. Okay? Faded. We know, I remember having a question like, what causes cheese fading? So I would look into that. Like, we do call that bleached sometimes, but a lot of times you're going to see fading due to lights or exposure. So excess fat in the milk curd, exposure to light or oxygen. I remember that being formed into a question somehow. Wink. Feed. Feed, yeah, you got to know feed. Feed affects flavor. So it's kind of like that's part of the beginning of our entire industry. What our animals eat and digest, that's the basis and the groundwork that creates the products that all of us work with. So very important. Fermented, absolutely. The finish, that's good. We know, I think they'll probably use that more in a sentence as far as talking about what a finish is. Let's keep going through here. Firm, too firm. Probably not too big. Flat or lacks flavor, could be. Flavor, I would know how the American Cheese Society defines flavor. That's a fair statement. Know how that goes. Foreign, that they would use that in a sentence. I don't think this would be less of a question. And here's what I mean by it being less of a question. Because the definition is, it's a term, foreign may refer to a flavor that is not expected in a dairy product, or foreign matter. It seems like a given, right? But I think they would use that more in a sentence. Like, there's foreign matter or foreign object in the cheese. What do you do? I would think they would probably use that in more of like a HACCP kind of critical control point, or either a recall, because recalls you have to know about. And I think they would use a foreign matter in a cheese more about a recall, if that makes sense in a question. But hair, insect, herbs, metal ferment, I found all of that in cheese in my days. Some of it more disgusting than others. Free cream, the cream dress, yeah, that's maybe that's on there. Free moisture, free whey, that could be like the whey that's left that sits in the dirty part of the blue cheese. That could be in there, absolutely. Frog mouth, I'm going to tell you, yes, frog mouth, know that one. Wink, wink. Fruity is a good thing to know. Grassy is a good way to describe it, but what does it mean? Greasy, more about butter. Heat, kind of know what heat is. This is in relation to tasting it. Heated. Let's see. Irregular eyes, anything to do with eyes, absolutely no. Itchy, a mouthfeel or sensation of itchiness and tingling that occurs during or after consuming certain styles of cheese. This phenomenon is not well understood. If it's not well understood and not necessarily a fact, they're probably not going to ask you a specific question about it. Good to know about, but they may not ask you. Hopefully that makes sense. Lactic, absolutely, you got to know that. Lipase, I just see that where you got to know that. Wink. Lipase, know it. Malty, matted, mealy, meaty, metallic, mites. Here we go. I would absolutely know mites. Anybody out there know what one cheese made in Europe is the mite king, so to speak? If you don't know it, it's Mimolette. And besides knowing about mites, I would know about Mimolette. But mites are absolutely on there. The main thing, too, members of the arachnid family. So definitely know about mites. Moldy, of course. Just know where mold comes from. Mottled could be. Mouthfeel. Let's see here. A few more minutes with you. These are all good to know, but I'm trying to pick out the most important ones for you. One-sided, I would know why things get one-sided. Let's see. Open. Overset, absolutely no overset. Oxidized, yes, absolutely no oxidized. Sorry, I'm trying to highlight there for you. Oxidized, pasty a little bit, pinking. Rancid, know what rancid is, know it ripe. Oh goodness, no ripe. Big term in our cheese world, know what it is. Ropey. Scorched, seamy. I don't remember much about it. Now sharp. That I could see that being on the test because that's a term that is thrown around a great deal. And a lot of times, you know, even novices like, I want the sharpest cheddar in the world, or I want the sharpest brie. We at the American Cheese Society, and are the point of this test, again, if we're to use the same terminology, this is one word that's all over the place. So I feel like just that fact alone means it has a higher chance of being on the test because there's a higher need for us to be on the same page about it. Shattered curd, probably. Shrunk is slip coat. I'll stop and give that one the time it needs. Slip coat, absolutely. Excessive proteolysis. We've seen that word a couple of times now. Look it up. That's a big word, proteolysis. I would know that. Under the rind leads to a liquid layer on top of an acidic, firmer cheese. This happens if you're ever familiar with Humboldt Fog or even Truffle Trimmer. Beautiful cheeses. And they've got that nice little cream line right under the rind. But once that starts to overripe, the problem is I see a lot of pictures like that on the internet or like on Instagram. And I'm like, that cheese isn't good. But slip coat, it's a bad thing. Slits, good thing to know. Sour storage, Struble, Anything that has to do with eyes, again, keep that up. Sulfide, I think I remember something about that used in a sentence. Sweet holes, texture. Tyrosine crystals, boom, absolutely on the test. Tyrosine is a little bit more important. That affects us all in our cheese industry, especially us who sell cheese and talk to customers, and explaining why it's still good. Tyrosine crystals, absolutely know those. Underset, I recall that on the test. Umami, I think again, that's they're going to use that in a sentence, probably less than a question, but just know about umami and that it is one of the flavors that we can pick up. Unclean, absolutely know that. Uneven is a good one. Volatiles, that's a good one to know too. The experience of flavor through aroma. Whey taint, that's a bigger one to know. And yeasty is good. All right. So I know that was I know that took a while, but hopefully you see where I'm going. There's a lot of information. I just want to help you get that narrowed down. So now you know you are accountable for knowing all of that, but spend more time on the items that I just listed out for you. Hopefully that's cue with all of you. Okay, any questions, comments, or snide remarks so far? All right, we're doing good. Then we're going to keep going. So we don't have a lot of time left. We've got just a few more minutes, but the other fantastic, super duper important tool to study for this exam is the best practice guide for cheesemakers. This is a super important, I don't know, like put stars and asterisks all around this. Not gonna lie to you, I spent a majority of my study time on this packet alone. You know, this kind of pulls information. Like if you go through again what we looked at on the website, know that. But this best practice guide for cheesemakers, I highly suggest read it a few times. This is your number one study guide, especially once you get past the definitions. This has it all written out. Now it's not, here's the tricky part. A lot of the study materials are not listed out in order of the domains that's listed. And that's where like ACS doesn't have a specific study guide to actually go through. It's got its domains and what it could have on there. It's up to us to look at all these materials and try to help put them into the domains where they go. So just read through here. Let's see, it takes several pages. All right. So we're on page 11 of the guide. And that's really the first page before, you know, of the real information we need. But here you also see the production of high quality milk is essential for producing safe, high quality cheese. The milk may be produced from milk of a single herd, multiple herds, or blended from different species. The Pasteurized Milk Ordinance, PMO, again, that's an acronym you need to write down and know, because they literally could, like some of the questions could be, what does PMO stand for? It could be that simple. I know we're like, that seems like a gimme. Some questions are like that. But milk is a lacterial secretion practically free of colostrum obtained by the complete milking of one or more healthy cows, goats, sheep, water buffalo, or other hoofed animals. 100%. That's a question on your test. You know it now. So again, you're getting a lot more. And here it just continues on. This is what we read on the website already. So we know that there's several things in here. So what I want you to get from this is the same way to read where you're reading the website. It's you got to go through it. Some of it seems like some of it's skimmable, but where do you pick out what sounds like a question? Where do you pick out what feels like pertinent, important information? That's where you need to stop. So just looking through here, I want to make sure I give you a good example. All this is for your reading materials. Here we go. 1.2, we talk about animal health. Just to give you an example, animals in poor health can produce milk that contains human pathogens such as Salmonella SPP. Oh my God, Salmonella is absolutely on there. I'm going to give you a big heads up. The major causative agents of mastitis. So me reading this, I've got, oh my God, just these 2 sentences, I've got 3 questions. Animals in poor health can produce milk that contains human pathogens such as Salmonella. That could be a question. Animals in poor health could produce human pathogens such as and give you choices to choose from. Major causative agents of mastitis. Number 1, that means we have to know what mastitis is. That is 1,000% on your exam. That's an infection of the udder. That affects us all because that affects the quality of the milk, the quality of the cheese, whether somebody's going to get sick or not. So that is absolutely on there. And streptococcus, also on there, are not considered human pathogens. So here, there could be a question, what's a pathogen versus what's not? That could also be on there. The presence of food-borne pathogens in milk is due to direct contact with contaminated sources in the dairy farm environment and to the secretion from the udder of an infected animal. But y'all see what I mean? Like hidden in here are questions, like our statements that could be turned into questions. That's one of them. Absolutely. Like the environment, where do you find these foodborne pathogens? What do they due to? They're due to contaminated sources in the dairy environment and the secretion from the udder of an infected animal. That's how to think while you're reading all of this. All right. Milking animals that appear to be producing abnormal milk is one or more quarters must be milked last or with separate equipment, and their milk must be discarded. You got to know that. A lot, like when you're talking about animal health, that directly translates and goes into our health after consuming that animal's product. Okay. So that has a higher chance of being asked. And that's where to go. Even when looking at somatic cell counts, you got to know these somatic cell counts. You got to know what they are. You got to know what's permittable. Cows and sheep luckily have the same amount. Goat, more are permittable. So I would know, like, there's at least one question specifically with somatic cell counts, but you got to know why they're important, all that good stuff. So poor barn hygiene, poor milking procedures can lead to contaminated milk by enteric pathogens such as E. coli, Salmonella, Listeria, Yersinia, Campylobacter. All of those, what it just listed, all of that, you got to remember all of these different illnesses. We'll get to that in another training, but you need to know what each of them are. What is E. coli? Where do you get it from? What symptoms does it cause? Salmonella, what is it? Where do you get it? And what symptoms does it cause? Listeria, the same thing. And that's a lot of information, but again, hopefully some of you with a little bit more food service background have that in your head, but that is 100% on the test. You're going to get that is a huge deal in our industry. People getting sick from eating cheese that we sell is extremely important. So they place a great deal of importance on it. There's at least 25 questions specific just to this information. So take that time. If this is what you know a little bit less of, take more time to study it. But I'm going to give you a huge heads up. That's on there. Absolutely important. Excellent. Well, I'm going to bring this to a close. It is 2:26 now. I do want to be able to offer the opportunity for any questions or comments. I did a little stop share. Anybody out there have any questions or comments, not only about the exam itself, but about the training procedure? Hopefully you understand how everything's going. I'm not getting any replies, so I'm assuming everybody is understanding how this rolls. Did anybody find this helpful? Or do they prefer a different way?
This is good.
Okay, perfect. Again, this is I know, again, there's 1,000 things. We also, I'll send this out, but I also, there's an IDF version of the training, and it's broken up differently than the domain. So there's a lot of information, but to start out with, most of the information is from this website. You have all the tools you need right now to probably pass, not do great, but, but start here. And again, if you're reading any other materials, whether it's from my IDF or from any of the books that are suggested, go to the ACS website and use that definition that they list, and you'll end up well. All right, so this session has been recorded. I'll make sure to send this out in a link if you'd like to rewatch it. And again, I will post it to the Institut du Fromage YouTube page, where trainings of CCP already exist. So there's already several videos. My friend Zoe Brickley from Jasper Hill Cellars has made several videos for us, again, with milk, affinage, and cheese making. So we have three of those specific videos that are out there for you to watch at your leisure for free, because all these trainings are for all my friends who enjoy cheese. I'll send out my travel schedule is a little bit hit and miss nowadays. So I'll send out hopefully a bigger heads up as far as when the next training is, but there is a goal to have one of these every single month until the exam. All righty. If you have any questions, again, my email address is here in the chat. And if you've been invited, you got it. Please reach out to me anytime, and good luck studying. Have a good day, everybody.
Thank you, sir.